All right, everyone, welcome. This is a talk on tornado safety and tornadoes as well. My name is Pat McCarthy, former meteorologist with the Weather Service. I'm doing this on behalf of the Meteorological and Oceanographic Society. Our society has a chapter here, and we like to share scientific talks with the public. So we'll start off making my computer work. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so I think most people have heard of the term Tornado Alley, and when they think of Tornado Alley, they think of the big tornadoes down in the United States. In general, the area what they're talking about is sort of this part here, the Great Plains of the United States and sort of to the eastern edge as well. These are just locations of strong tornadoes from the United States over I think it's a century. And so you can see that there's a lot, but the majority of them occur in this area. And why is that? Well, you have Gulf in the springtime, Gulf moisture, warm temperatures, moisture floods into this region. And to the north, it's still cold. And so there's a lot of cold air coming down from the north, and it clashes through this area. And you add the jet stream through that area, and it really helps organize those storms. So this is the area where you tend to see lots of tornadoes. Now, in the summertime, that area moves north. The jet stream moves north, the warm air moves north, the cold air retreats, and we end up having the same conditions, but now they're aligned more, what we call the northern plains. So that would be the prairie provinces, southern prairie provinces, Dakotas, Montana, and so on. And so it's sort of a northern tornado alley, and another alley occurring at the same time is one up in this area, which affects places like southern Ontario, Quebec, and maybe even into the Maritimes. So those are the two primary. So that's why we start thinking about tornado activity at this time of the year. So Canada ranks second in the world, and that surprises a lot of people in terms of tornado occurrences. We get about historically 60 to 80 tornadoes a year. However, that number is starting to climb as we begin to learn more about where to look for some of these tornado occurrences in Canada. Now, most of these occur on the prairies, again, traditionally 42, but that number is probably slowly going to be increasing as we get better awareness of what's going on. Part of that research was done by Sills and others, looking at this. They knew there's a lot of lightning and thunderstorms occurring all across the region, but people only live down in those little southern areas, and so they were trying to figure out if we're getting the same type of lightning and same type of storms in the more forested areas, can we assume that a certain percentage are going to produce tornadoes? And so they came up with that there's probably 230-ish, on average, tornadoes that are occurring in Canada, with a good chunk of them being completely missed because there's no one there to see it from happen. Looking at this map, which shows the location of tornadoes across the prairies, you can see there's dots all over the place. There's even a few, like here, a couple at Churchill, a few in this area. So some are related to First Nation communities being affected. Forestry people noting tornadoes from their towers, planes flying over damage areas, and so on. So there's probably a lot more occurring, much like that study said. Another thing you might notice on this chart, there's lots of dots, but you may notice that some of the dots are sort of in squiggly lines, or in some cases straight lines. And that's because those are the highways. So all the towns are on some sort of highway, and a lot of traffic goes along those highways. So that's where people are seeing the tornadoes. So we have a lot of these empty areas in here. It's simply because there's no one really around to report them or even see them. And so that's why there's probably a lot more tornadoes occurring in this area. Some years it's not as much. Some years there's a lot of tornado activity. There have been some major killer tornadoes as well. The big one in Regina in 1912 killed 28 people and 30 in total. Edmonton, so it's a recent one, 27 killed, hundreds injured, 1987. Pine Lake, Alberta, the latest major one, which was 2012 people killed, 140 injured, and there's some Ontario and Quebec ones as well. But what you notice is that like the Regina, Edmonton, and Pine Lake, the big killer tornadoes are actually occurring on the Canadian prairies. Nothing in Manitoba, thankfully, but they do occur, and essentially they're getting the similar conditions as to what we would get here in Manitoba. So looking at Manitoba tornadoes, again, we average 8 or 9 a year. Those are the ones that were reported, and as we said before, there's probably more occurring each year. The last EF4, and I'll talk about the EF scale in a bit, but that's a rating scale. So 5 is like the highest. So 4, which is a very powerful tornado. The last EF4 in Canada was in Manitoba at Alonza. Canada's only EF5 tornado was in Eli. And Canada's most recent tornado fatalities were unfortunately last year in Manitoba as well. There have been 10 tornadoes that have struck the urban area of Winnipeg over the past 125 years. So that surprises a lot of people. Most of them weren't doing significant destruction. But every year, you can imagine 125 years ago, the city wasn't as big as it is now, and our city just keeps getting bigger. But in terms of stronger tornadoes, we are getting them already in Manitoba. So yeah, I wanted to mention about this scale. So the Fujita scale, the F, it's the F part. It used to be how we measured storms. So it was the F0, F1s, and so on. But then they modernized it, and so it's been enhanced. So they call it now the enhanced Fujita scale, and it goes from 0 to 5, which 0 being weak damage and 5 being high. So in this case, I'm going to show you some pictures from the Eli tornado. So this home here was impacted, but you can see there's not much damage. Like most of the shingles are still there, the roof is intact, maybe a few broken windows. But in general, in terms of tornadoes, this is pretty light damage. And this would be in the EF0, maybe to low EF1 scale. So that's kind of the scale you're looking at. The next house affected here has a lot more damage. You see most all the windows are smashed out from the debris. There's pieces of roof missing here. A lot of shingles are missing. A good chunk of the roof is out here. This is where we're starting to get into close into the EF2 scale. So when you start losing big chunks of the roof, we're sort of getting into the low end of the EF2 scales. So, but there's a lot of EF1 damage in this picture. Farther down the road on Eli, this was a house that suffered heavy damage. Some of the walls are still intact. You see the roof is essentially missing. This used to be a garage. So a lot of stuff is damaged, but there's still some standing walls. When we see this kind of damage, it's rated at EF3. So we have had EF3 damage. You can see this was the Eli case. So not all of the homes in Eli were heavily damaged, but this one is definitely heavily damaged. This is the next house over in Eli. The only thing that was left standing was the chimney, and part of it fell. All the walls were torn away, which is a good example of EF4. But some of the debris is still here because it got hung up during to the chimney here. But it would have been mostly removed if it wasn't for that chimney. So we're talking like a strong EF3 to low EF4 type of tornado. And then finally, the tornado that caused is that the right thing to do? This one house was completely removed. There was nothing left of it. It was bolted. You can see the bolts that bolted it down to this house. This was the F5 damage. Even though it was a well-built home, bolted down to the ground, it was completely swept away. So EF4s, if it was saying not as well anchored, it might have only got an EF4 rating, but in this case it was well anchored, it was completely carried away. So that makes it the EF5. So those are very rare. We may have had storms of that intensity, but this is based on damage. So if a large tornado moves through an area, the same tornado that we have here just goes through an open field, it would be like an F0 because it didn't damage anything. The scale is based upon the damage that we see. So there could be a lot more of these EF4, EF5 tornadoes floating around. They're just not hitting anything. Here's just a list of tornadoes that were killer tornadoes in Manitoba. The Alonzo one, which we mentioned earlier, an interesting thing about that one, it was the strongest tornado reported around the world that year. So we do get very powerful tornadoes in Manitoba. And people often wonder why big cities don't get hit. Well, actually, they get hit a lot. We saw in the earlier, Regina was hit. Edmonton was also hit. So there are cities being hit. And here's some pictures of tornadoes in the United States that are being hit. And just across the border in North Dakota, at Fargo, the northern powerful tornado swept through the northern part of the city, leveling it. And 10 people were killed and 103 people were injured. So in the weather world, that's really close. That's really close to us. Yeah, and again, here's the Edmonton tornado, give you a sense of it. It tracked northward along just the edge of the city. We'll see a sort of another picture of that. So just kind of remember this shape. Also, the Edmonton tornado, this slide here in the middle, it was the trailer park. So 14 of the 27 people killed were in this trailer park. The tornado wasn't as big as the picture up above. This is when it was at its full intensity. Down here, it was only about an F2 tornado, but it still obliterated this part of the trailer park. Trailers, cabins, anything that's loose or is weakly built will devastate this type of structures. It doesn't take much for a tornado to destroy things. So things you have to consider if you have a trailer park or a family that has a trailer park, or if you have cabins, that type of stuff. And you can see the power in the bottom there of the tornado. Okay, zooming in back on that dotted map, and again, you're seeing the same kind of things occurring along the roads where events had occurred. And then there's some that are in between because a lot of farms get hit. But Edmonton, as we mentioned, Winnipeg, as we mentioned before, 10 tornadoes have occurred within the city boundary. And you can see the dots where they occurred. It's a pretty big target. But you can see there's a lot more space where tornadoes can occur. So the odds of it, a big one hitting Winnipeg, are actually pretty low because there's a lot more areas to hit. So things like trees, power lines, farms, parks, campgrounds, there's a lot more of them. They're bigger. Some are bigger. They're more likely to get hit, where cities, towns, and villages, oddly enough, are less likely to get hit because there's so few of them. There's so many other things out there that are less likely to get hit. But they have been hit. Like there's definitely been towns, city, Winnipeg's been struck 10 times, so they do occur. Here's a couple of pictures from Winnipeg tornadoes. This is 1969. This is a tornado passing along the edge of the airport. It caused damage before it got into the spot, but it was a pretty good tornado. 2006, near the northern perimeter, this funnel cloud is actually a tornado. It's you can see there's debris swirling around at the bottom. So the cloud part of the tornado doesn't have to be touching the ground for it to be a tornado. As long as there's circulation occurring with this funnel at the ground, it's a tornado. So that sometimes confuses people. So in terms of safety, there's like 3 things you need to worry about. Preparedness, just sort of, stuff you do way before a tornado occurs. Awareness when stuff's starting to happen and whether you need to, you have to monitor it. And then there's a taking action part where you have to do something to protect yourself. So there's a number of things to look at for this. So this first one shows you when are tornadoes likely to occur in Manitoba. In this case, this is the Canadian prairies, but they're all, Saskatchewan looks the same, Alberta looks the same, and Manitoba looks the same. So this is for all the prairies. But the main area of time for tornadoes occurs in mid-June, so like starting today, to mid-August. And the peak tends to occur in the early July part of the event of the year. So we get a lot of tornadoes occurring. Outside that, we can still get tornadoes, but the threat is a lot less than it is in this section. So once we're in this zone, we have to be cognizant that when we have severe thunderstorms, now there's always a chance that some may produce tornadoes. So just be aware of that. And then there's the question of what time of the day should you look at. So again, looking at all the prairies, and it's very similar across the prairies. It's just the combined numbers. What you'll notice is that very little occurs overnight. It's cold, cooler, and no one can see things, so it's they're going to miss them. But things really pick up in the afternoon, and they're very strong in the evening. So that's kind of like your prime time. So the main area is like supper time to about 9 o'clock. That's where most of the tornadoes occur. And in the afternoon, there's a lot of tornadoes too, but not quite as many. These ones actually, oddly enough, tend to be somewhat on the weaker side in general, whereas these ones in general tend to be on the more powerful side. But they can occur, both can occur in any of these times. So about preparedness. So we know that when the storms can occur and what time they occur. Then there's a question of, sort of preparing yourself for some type of tornado. So this is a big case. So this is a metal manufacturing plant in Illinois. It was struck by an F4 tornado. And this is what happened to it, completely leveled. It happened during the daytime. All the staff were there. And how many people were killed? None. And it was none because the company built in the middle of these things, sort of more reinforced structure that they use for other stuff, but were big enough to host all the staff should a tornado be approaching. And that's what happened. They all went to this shelter. Place was leveled, but nobody got hurt because they prepared for tornadoes and had these things in place. Now, we typically don't see that here in Canada, unfortunately. So there's things like refineries, hospitals, care homes, critical infrastructure like the police and the fire, malls, stadiums, and so on, festivals. These are all super vulnerable places, but for the most part, while they have emergency procedures, most of them, if not all of them, do not have emergency procedures for tornadoes. Tornadoes is little to no notice compared to, say, again, a snowstorm. That can be days away. So that is always a problem. Schools. I was involved with the school boards and helping them try to, establish procedures for safety in schools, and they took it and they ran with it. And I know a lot of the schools in the city, if not all of them, now have tornado plans, and they run tornado drills. I'm not sure all of them. I can't guarantee that they're all like that. You may want to talk to your school to find out if they do have their plans, but I have seen them in action in my son's schools, and they do a really good job. They know where the safe areas are. They know where the areas to avoid. So the other thing you need to know before to help you protect yourself is where to go. In general, it's go low and put as many walls between you and the tornado. So go low. So when we look at this structure here, if a tornado hits, it normally will, if it's a strong tornado, it'll tear the roof off first. That weakens the walls a bit. Then the second floors will be destroyed, and then the lower floors will be destroyed. This could be a single, if it was just a single story room, then this happens very quickly. So where do you need to protect yourself? And the idea is to go low. So if you have a basement, basements are great. Maybe small. If you have a bathroom in the basement, even better. If you don't have a basement, look for small rooms that are away from the outside walls, preferably. And those are bathrooms as well. They're very strong compared to these big open spaces in your living room and so on. So those are the kind of things that you'd want to look for. And if you did get in there, it could be a closet too, as it mentions up here. But again, so outside walls, crouch down, protect yourself. And for most tornadoes, that's going to be good enough. It's those big, heavy-duty ones that are very rare, but are out there. We have to worry about. And a lot of people bring, as part of their plan, is to have blankets, maybe even your bike helmets or something, pillows that you take with you, so that you can cover yourself up should the tornado hit you. So those are good things to do. And if you're living in a structure like, say, a cabin or a mobile home or trailer or something that's not really well built and is not attached well to the ground, you may want to consider having it part of your plan, going to another place that will handle that can handle it's stronger, that can handle being able to protect you. So if you're in say a condo or a business that's got many stories, stairwells are really good. They're probably one of the strongest parts of a building to protect yourself. Underground parking is also a great place. So if you have that, that's a good place to go. I know during the Edmonton tornado, I was there, and pretty well all the staff in the building went into the underground parking to protect themselves as a tornado narrowly missed us. I mentioned those big open areas, those big roofs, like stadiums, and here's a theater. So this is a school gymnasium, and a theater auditorium. They have their auditorium in this giant building. And you can see once the roof weakened, the whole storm was torn away. This here looks like a floor, but it's actually the 2-story brick wall that was standing here, and it just fell into the mansion. So it's a good thing they're not protecting, they didn't drag all of the students and teachers into this room hoping that would protect them, because you can see it's very vulnerable to collapse. Trees are always a problem. So if you have trees around your property, your campground, those, I think, you have to be very careful about having those things nearby. So if there's going to be storms, you might say, well, now this is a little too dangerous for our tent. So it's something that causes a lot of injuries and deaths. This is the big trailer park. You see there's some vehicles in there that still seem to left standing while one of the trailers were tossed. Some people always wonder, is a vehicle better for you? There's a lot of debate about that. Some people, for the longest time, some people said you abandon your vehicle and hide in a ditch. Suppose you're out in the highway or something. Get your vehicle, get away from the car, lay it low in the ditch. Some have said just drive your car into the ditch. It's all debatable, and the problem is that people don't want to get out of their car. Again, they feel safe in their car and they don't want to get out of it. Traffic jams are a problem too if you live in a city, and that's always an issue. And if you're outside and you see a tornado and you have the time, you can drive at right angles, try to watch it and see if there's any possible which way the tornadoes are going, and then take a different direction. So awareness, that's we're lucky to have the Prairie Arctic Storm Prediction Center in Manitoba, which is the federal weather service. Again, they're open 24/7, and they produce the forecast, watches, and warnings. And you can see it here. This is them in action. They produce all the stuff that you need to warn you. And so they provide a great level of awareness. They have, they're all trained severe weather meteorologists. They have Doppler radar, supercomputers, spotters, and so on. Information is constantly flowing in. They hear from the Twitter accounts and everything. So they really are up on stuff. And their job is to issue those bulletins. So they will issue outlooks to give you a sense as to what might happen today and tomorrow. And then if something is happening today, and it looks like something's going to be happening, there's a good probability something's going to happen, they'll start issuing watches. So fear thunderstorm watches or tornado watches. And that means that one or both of those things are likely over the next 2 to 6 hours. And the information in those bulletins help clarify that. So anyways, that gives you a chance to plan your day. You remember, okay, where should we be? Are we safe going to the park today, and so on, right? This helps you plan your day. The website, if you just type in weather.gc.ca, you'll find all this stuff. There's tons of information that they provide on the internet, and they have an app called WeatherCan, and it's pretty good. It's got the radar, it has all the warnings. You can program it, change the commute. Suppose you have a cottage in Lactabani, you can change this to Lactabani, and it'll give you warnings and the weather for Lactabani while you're out there. So it's pretty good. And then there's the warnings. This is the take action. So, something is happening. There are tornadoes, there are severe storms, whatever it is, they're coming and they're moving into your area. It's broadcast by the media, phone apps, weather radio, if not as much, than the internet. it'll broadcast on that app that I just showed you. It may even be trigger the National Warning System alert ready, and which will get the stuff on your phone and a lot more detailed information. This is the kind of thing that will pop up. And usually they do it for tornadoes, but sometimes other weather events. Tornadoes are easy to see when you're on the prairie. This one was Pine Lake, and it's on the prairie, but it was rain wrapped, and there was a hill between it and the trailer park, so they didn't even see it coming when they got hit. And so they're easy to see, harder to see in the city or the forest. So that makes something you have to consider. And if it's not moving, the tornado, but it's getting bigger, that means it's moving towards you. So it's amazing how people forget that. Okay, so this is what happens as the flying debris. That's often your first sign that a tornado is nearby. So here it is approaching, it's shooting debris all over the place. But if you're down at the ground level with buildings and trees and stuff in the way, you're not going to see the tornado, but you might see the debris. And people often describe it as flying birds. It's amazing how often I hear that. And so you'll see things flying by over your head. You may also hear the roar for the tornado. It'll be somewhat distant at first, and it's just gradually getting stronger and stronger and stronger as it approaches. Finally, we did a study on taking the Edmonton tornado and laying it over the city of Winnipeg just to see what would happen. And it was a lot more populated area than what happened in Edmonton. And the result was that there'd be we estimated about 128 people would be killed if this tornado had crossed Winnipeg, with many deaths. But when looking at other cities that are well prepared, the average would be about probably 35 people. A tornado this big is going to kill people, unfortunately. But you can really reduce the numbers if the city's prepared and people are prepared to respond. So in summary, next 2 months, prime time, keep your eye on the weather. There's lots of forecasts, lots of information for you. Use this time to figure out the best places for shelter. And then during the day, listen for watches and maybe warnings that might be affecting your area. And remember, go low, put as many walls between you and the tornado. So thank you, and have a great summer.